The autumn wind carried ash and the scent of dying leaves as Mira stood before the obsidian gates of Thornhaven Fortress. Her fingers trembled against the cold iron, knuckles white from both cold and fear. Behind her lay nothing: the orphanage that had expelled her at dawn, the village that had no use for girls with no family and no coin. Before her stood the only place in the northern territories still hiring servants willing to work in a cursed house. The gates opened without her touching them. A hunched woman in gray wool emerged from the shadows, her face weathered like ancient bark. "You're the girl from the posting?" Mira nodded, throat too tight for words. "Can you keep silent?" "Yes." "Can you obey without question?" "Yes." The woman's eyes narrowed, searching Mira's face for something she couldn't name. "The work is hard. The nights are harder. You'll sleep in the east wing, never the west. You'll avoid the courtyards after dusk. You'll speak to no one of what you hear." "I understand." "No," the woman said softly. "You don't, but you will." Thornhaven loomed ahead, all sharp spires and shadowed stone, windows like watching eyes. Mira had heard the stories everyone had. The Lycan King who ruled the northern packs lived here, a beast man cursed by witch blood, a warrior who had ended 3 rival alphas in single combat. Some said he was mad, others said he was dying. All agreed he was dangerous, but Mira had nowhere else to go. The woman led her through corridors that smelled of pine and something metallic: old blood, perhaps, or fear itself. Servants moved like ghosts, eyes downcast, voices never rising above whispers. The fortress felt alive, breathing with secrets and watching every step. "You'll work the lower kitchens," the woman said. "You'll prepare the night meals. You'll leave them outside the king's chamber before moonrise and return to your quarters immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes." "If you hear howling, you stay in your room. If you hear chains, you lock your door. If you hear screaming." The woman paused, her weathered face suddenly ancient. "You pray it's not yours." Mira's room was small but clean, a narrow bed beneath a window that overlooked the northern woods. She had no possessions to unpack, only the threadbare dress she wore and the fear that had followed her through the gates. That night, she prepared the meal as instructed: venison, dark bread, wine that smelled of herbs, and something bitter. Her hands moved mechanically, chopping and stirring, while the other servants avoided her gaze. New girls never lasted. She'd heard one whisper. The king's curse devoured hope. She carried the tray through empty corridors, the stone walls pressing close, torches, casting shadows that moved wrong. The king's chamber stood at the end of the west wing, behind doors carved with wolves and moons and symbols she didn't recognize. Mira set the tray down, hands shaking so badly the wine sloshed. Behind the door, something growled, not a human sound. Not entirely. She ran, back through the corridors, back to her small room, heart hammering against her ribs. She locked the door as instructed and pressed her back against the wood, breathing hard. The howling started at midnight. It wasn't the sound of wolves in the forest. It was closer, deeper, filled with rage and anguish that made her bones ache. She covered her ears, but the sound crawled inside her skull, wrapped around her thoughts. Then, abruptly, silence. Mira stood frozen, listening to her own heartbeat. A single word drifted through the darkness, barely audible, spoken in a voice like gravel and smoke. "Who?" She didn't sleep that night, and when dawn came, pale and cold through her window, she knew her life had changed in ways she couldn't yet understand. 3 days passed in careful routine. Mira worked the kitchens, avoided eye contact, delivered meals to the carved doors and fled before the growling started. The other servants watched her with something between pity and curiosity. New girls usually broke within a week, but Mira had survived worse than fear. The orphanage had taught her how to be invisible, how to endure silence and cold and hunger. Thornhaven was just another kind of cage. On the 4th night, the head cook, a broad woman named Elda with flour-dusted hands, stopped her before she could leave the kitchens. "You're still here?" Mira nodded, uncertain if this was accusation or observation. "Most run by now. The howling drives them mad, or the silence does." Elda wiped her hands on her apron, studying Mira's face. "You're different, quieter. That might be good, or it might be worse. I have nowhere else to go. Everyone has somewhere. You chose to stay." Had she? Mira wasn't certain. She'd simply continued breathing, continued moving, continued existing, because stopping seemed harder than enduring. "The king asked about you," Elda said quietly. Mira's heart stopped. "What?" "This morning. He asked who'd been leaving his meals. I told him your name. Elda's expression softened slightly. He hasn't asked about a servant in 2 years. Not since the curse took full hold. What does that mean? It means you should be careful. Or it means you're already lost. Elda turned back to her work. Either way, deliver tonight's meal. And if he speaks, answer. The corridor felt longer that evening, the shadows deeper. Mira's hands didn't shake as she carried the tray. She'd learned to control that, to bury fear beneath practice calm. But her pulse thrummed wild, and her breath came shallow. She reached the carved doors, set down the tray, turned to leave. Wait, the voice was rough, commanding and human enough to make her freeze, but human enough to make her turn. Through the gap beneath the door, she saw darkness, then movement, then eyes amber and burning and utterly fixed on the space where she stood. You're the new girl. Not a question. A statement wrapped in gravel. Yes, your majesty. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You don't smell afraid. Mira blinked. I am afraid. A sound like dark laughter. No, you smell of resignation, of exhaustion, of someone who's already decided fear is pointless. A pause. What's your name? Mira. Mira. He spoke it like tasting wine, testing the weight of it. How old are you? 19, your majesty. Why are you here? I needed work. Why here? She swallowed. Because no one else would have me. Silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. Then, leave the tray. Return tomorrow. Yes, your majesty. Mira. She paused. Lock your door tonight. The moon is waxing. I'm less controlled. She should have run. Should have fled Thornhaven and never looked back. Instead, she heard herself say, I will. Thank you. The eyes beneath the door glowed brighter. Then darkness swallowed them. Mira returned to her room, locked the door as instructed, and waited for the howling. It came at midnight, as always. But tonight it sounded different, less rage, more anguish. Like something dying slowly, fighting every breath. She pressed her palms against the locked door and whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry. The howling stopped. In the sudden silence, she heard chains rattle. Then a voice, barely human, spoke a single word. Stay. Mira closed her eyes and made a choice she didn't understand. I will. The summons came at dawn. A different servant, younger, pale, terrified, knocked on Mira's door and handed her a folded parchment sealed with black wax. The king requests your presence in the Eastern Solarium. Noon. Mira's hands trembled as she read it twice, searching for hidden threat or mercy. She found neither. The Eastern Solarium was a glass-walled room overlooking the forest, filled with autumn light and the scent of dying roses. Mira entered to find a man standing with his back to her, silhouetted against the windows. Not a beast. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark leather and wool. His hair was black as midnight, tied back from a face she couldn't yet see. But his stillness was absolute. The kind of control that came from constant vigilance. Close the door. She obeyed. He turned. Mira forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, dangerous, inevitable, impossible to look away from. His face was all sharp angles and shadow, a strong jaw marked by old scars, lips pressed into a hard line. But his eyes were what trapped her, amber and burning and filled with something between hunger and despair. You're afraid now, he said quietly. No, your majesty. Liar. But there was no anger in it. Almost amusement. Everyone fears me. It's safer that way. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of disappointing you. His expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. Why would you care about disappointing me? Because you asked me to stay. And no one. She stopped, swallowed. No one has asked me to stay anywhere before. Silence stretched between them. He moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate, each step measured. Mira forced herself not to retreat. Do you know what I am? His voice was low, controlled, barely above a whisper. You're the Lycan King. I'm cursed. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckled fists at his sides. Witch blood magic. Every full moon I lose myself completely. Every waxing moon I lose a little more control. One day soon, I won't come back at all. I'm sorry. I don't want your pity. The words were harsh, but his eyes were pleading for something she couldn't name. He stopped, turned away. I don't know what I want anymore. Mira took a breath. Why did you ask me here? Because when you stood outside my door, the beast quieted. For the first time in 3 years, I felt calm. He laughed, dark and bitter. Absurd, isn't it? A cursed king finding peace in a servant girl. Not absurd, she said softly. Unexpected. He turned back to her, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart stutter. What are you? Nothing. No one. Just Mira. Just Mira, he repeated, taking another step closer. Who calms monsters and doesn't run when she should. Should I run? Yes. His jaw clenched. But I'm selfish enough to hope you won't. Then I'll stay. Something broke in his expression, relief and agony tangled together. The full moon is in 5 days. I'll be chained in the dungeons. It's not safe for anyone, but especially not for you. Why especially me? He looked at her like she'd asked why water was wet. Because you matter. And I don't trust myself not to destroy everything that matters. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Mira couldn't fully grasp. She should have been terrified, should have fled. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What's your name?" He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Kale, Kale, she repeated, tasting the shape of it. Thank you for telling me. You should go, he said roughly. Before I do something we'll both regret. Mira nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. I'll still bring your meals, I know. His voice was barely audible. That's what terrifies me. She left him standing in the light, a shadow among shadows, and wondered what curse could be strong enough to break a man who looked at her like she was worth saving. The days before the full moon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mira continued her work, but everything felt different now. She knew his name. She'd seen his face. She understood, however dimly, that she represented something to him beyond another servant. It should have made her cautious. Instead, it made her bold. On the 3rd day, she found him in the library, a cavernous room lined with ancient texts and the smell of old leather. He stood before a window, one hand pressed against the glass, watching the forest with eyes that saw too much. You shouldn't be here, he said, without turning. I brought tea. She set the tray on a nearby table. Elda said you haven't eaten in days. I'm not hungry. You need your strength. For what? To survive another moon? To wake up covered in blood and hope it's only animal? He turned, and the rawness in his expression nearly broke her. There's no point anymore, Mira. The curse is winning. She moved closer, driven by instinct. She didn't understand. Then fight harder. I've been fighting for 3 years. I'm tired. Then rest. I can't. If I rest, I lose control. If I lose control, he stopped, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jump. You should be afraid of me. I'm not. You should be. The words came out harsh, almost a snarl, and his eyes flashed amber. Do you know what I am beneath the skin? What I become? I've killed men with my bare hands. I've torn apart enemies and felt nothing but satisfaction. I'm a monster wearing a crown, and you stand there like what? Like you trust me. The confession came out broken. And you shouldn't. Mira took another step, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. What if I choose to anyway? Then you're a fool, perhaps. But I'm a fool who's already decided to stay. His hands clenched into fists, every muscle taut with restraint. Mira, you need to leave, now. The moon is waxing and I can feel the beast clawing inside my skull. Your scent, he stopped, closed his eyes. You make it worse and better at the same time. I don't know whether to pull you closer or push you away. What does the beast want? His eyes snapped open, burning gold now instead of amber. To claim you, to mark you, to make you mine in every way that matters. His voice dropped to a growl. And the man wants the same thing, which makes this infinitely more dangerous. Mira should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. Instead, she lifted one hand and placed it gently against his chest. Feeling his heart thunder beneath her palm, Kale went utterly still. I'm not running, she whispered. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, so slowly she could have pulled away at any moment, he covered her hand with his own. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, trembling slightly despite his iron control. You're going to destroy me, he said quietly, or save you, same thing. Perhaps they stood like that, hand to heart. While outside the window the sun descended and the moon began its slow rise. Finally, Kale stepped back, breaking the contact with visible effort. Go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until dawn, no matter what you hear. Kale, please. The word was barely a whisper, heavy with desperation. If you care at all, you'll do this. Mira nodded and left, but at the door she turned back. He'd returned to the window, one hand pressed against the glass, silhouetted against the dying light. "I'll be here tomorrow," she said. "I know." His reflection smiled, sad and small. "That's what keeps me fighting." That night, the howling was different, less anguish, more longing. And when Mira pressed her hand against her locked door, she swore she felt an answering warmth on the other side. The day of the full moon arrived with heavy clouds and the smell of coming snow. The fortress felt different. Servants moved with practiced urgency, avoiding the west wing entirely, speaking in whispers about chains and reinforced doors and the guards who would stand watch. Mira was forbidden from working that day. Elda had been clear: stay in your room. Don't make noise. Don't draw attention. The king has ordered every servant confined for their safety. But Mira couldn't stop thinking about Kale, alone in the dungeons, waiting for the transformation that would steal his humanity. She'd seen the fear in his eyes that morning when he'd passed through the kitchens barely controlled. Jaw clenched, hands shaking despite his attempts to hide it. He'd looked at her for just a moment, and she'd seen the goodbye in his gaze. As if he didn't expect to survive this time, sunset came too quickly. Mira stood at her window, watching the moon rise fat and silver over the trees. Below, in the bowels of the fortress, she heard the first chains rattle. Then a scream, human at first, then dissolving into something else entirely. The transformation had begun. She should have stayed in her room, should have locked the door and covered her ears like every other servant. Instead, she found herself moving through the corridors, following the sound of anguish down stone steps into depths she'd never explored. 2 guards stood outside a reinforced iron door, their faces pale. They moved to stop her, but something in her expression made them hesitate. "He'll kill you," one said quietly. "No, he won't." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because he asked me to stay." She didn't understand why those words held power, but they did. The guards exchanged glances, then impossibly stepped aside. "On your head, girl." Mira pushed open the door. The dungeon was a circular chamber carved from living rock, lit by torches that cast writhing shadows. In the center, Kale knelt in chains, thick iron links attached to walls, floor, ceiling. But it was what he'd become that stole her breath. Not fully human, not fully beast. Caught between, his body twisted and reformed, bones breaking and healing, skin splitting to reveal dark fur beneath. His face was still partially recognizable, but his mouth had elongated into something between man and wolf, filled with teeth that gleamed in the torchlight, and his eyes were molten gold, filled with rage and recognition and desperate warning. "Run," they seemed to say. "Please run." Mira walked closer instead. The beast thing that was Kale lunged against the chains, snarling, foam flecking its jaws. The sound it made was pure nightmare, a howl wrapped around a scream wrapped around her name. "Kale," she said softly. "I'm here." The thrashing intensified. The chains groaned. Stone cracked. "I'm not leaving," she continued, taking another step. "I promised I'd stay." The beast froze, golden eyes locked on her face. For a moment, the snarling stopped. Then it threw back its head and howled, not rage this time, but anguish so pure it brought tears to her eyes. Mira did something insane. She knelt just beyond the chain's reach and placed her palm on the cold stone floor. "You're stronger than this curse," she whispered. "You're Kale. You're the Lycan King. And you asked me to stay because somewhere inside, you believe you're worth saving." The beast stared at her, sides heaving, muscles trembling with barely restrained violence. Then slowly, it lowered itself to the ground, mirroring her posture. Its clawed hand stretched toward her, stopping just short of where her palm rested on the stone, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of its skin. "That's it," she breathed. "You're still in there." The beast made a sound, half whimper, half growl, and closed its golden eyes. For a moment, something like peace crossed its twisted features. Then the moon's pull strengthened, and the rage returned. The beast threw itself against the chains with renewed fury, and Mira scrambled back as claws raked the air where she'd been kneeling. The guards burst in, grabbed her, dragged her from the chamber despite her protests. The last thing she saw before the door slammed shut was Kale's eyes, fully beast now, but still watching her with an intensity that burned. Back in her room, Mira pressed her hand against the window and listened to the howling echo through Thornhaven's bones. And she understood, finally, what she'd seen in those golden eyes. Not goodbye, but hello. Kale didn't emerge from the dungeons for 2 days. When he finally appeared, He looked like a man who'd walked through death and barely returned, gaunt, pale, with shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of nightmares beyond naming. He found Mira in the kitchens, where she was kneading bread with mechanical precision. The other servants fled the moment he entered, leaving them alone among the flour and the warm smell of baking. You came to the dungeons. His voice was rough, barely controlled. You saw, yes, and you're still here, yes. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders not roughly, but desperately, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Are you mad? Do you have any idea what I could have done? What I wanted to do? You didn't hurt me. I tried. The only thing that stopped me was the chains, and even those were cracking. Another moment and he released her abruptly, stepping back like she'd burned him. You can't do that again, ever. You were in pain. I'm always in pain. The words echoed off the stone walls. That doesn't give you the right to risk yourself for my comfort. Mira set down the dough, wiped flour from her hands. What if it wasn't just comfort? What if I actually helped? You didn't. He stopped, jaw clenching. You did. When you knelt there, spoke to me. The beast quieted. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than rage during the transformation. His hands curled into fists. And that's exactly why you can't come back. Because now the beast knows you exist. And it wants, what does it want? You. The word came out, strangled. The same thing I want. The same thing I can't have. Why can't you? Because I'm cursed, Mira. Because I'm dangerous and broken and destined to lose myself completely. Because you deserve better than a monster who might wake up one day and not recognize your face. She moved closer, and he retreated until his back hit the wall. What if I don't want better? What if I want you? You don't know what you're saying. Don't I? She stopped just in front of him, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. I've spent 19 years being invisible, being nothing to anyone. You see me. You asked me to stay. For the first time in my life, I matter to someone. You matter too much, he said roughly. That's the problem. Then push me away. Send me from Thornhaven. Forbid me from ever speaking to you again. She held his gaze. Do it, and I'll go. He stared at her, amber eyes burning with conflicted emotion. Then slowly, he lifted one hand and cupped her face, gentle, reverent, trembling with restraint. I can't, he whispered. I'm selfish enough to want you close, even knowing it might destroy us both. Then let me stay. Mira, please. Her own hand rose to cover his, holding it against her cheek. I'm not asking for promises or forevers. I'm asking for today. For this moment. For the chance to help you fight this curse instead of facing it alone. Something cracked in his expression, the last of his resistance crumbling beneath the weight of hope and desperation. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, until his forehead rested against hers. You're going to break my heart, he breathed, or heal it. They stood like that, breath mingling, hearts thundering in tandem, while outside the window the sun climbed higher, and somewhere deep in the forest, wolves howled to greet the day. Finally, Kale pulled back enough to meet her eyes. There are things you need to know. About the curse. About what it means if you truly choose to stay. Tell me. Not here. He glanced toward the door, where servants lingered, pretending not to eavesdrop. Tonight, my chambers. We need to talk about blood bonds and witch magic and the price of breaking curses. His jaw tightened. And about why your presence affects me the way it does. What do you mean? His thumb brushed her cheekbone, achingly gentle. I mean, there are only 2 things in this world that can calm a cursed Lycan. One is death. He paused, eyes dark with something between fear and wonder. The other is a mate bond. The word hung between them, mate, heavy with implications Mira didn't fully understand but felt in her bones nonetheless. Tonight, she agreed. He nodded and left. But at the doorway, he turned back one last time. Mira, thank you. For what? For being foolish enough to stay. Mira arrived at Kale's chambers as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. A servant, the same hunched woman who'd first let her through Thornhaven's gates, escorted her through corridors she'd never seen. Upstairs that spiraled into the fortress's highest tower. He's told you. Then, the woman said, without preamble. Told me what? About the bond. The woman's weathered face held no judgment, only weary knowledge. I wondered if he'd have the courage. Most alphas would take what they wanted and deal with consequences later. But Kale, she shook her head. He's always been too noble for his own good. They reached a door carved with wolves and moons. The woman knocked once, then left Mira standing alone in the corridor. Come in. Kale's chambers were smaller than she'd expected, a bedroom dominated by a massive bed, a sitting area with chairs arranged before a fireplace, walls lined with books and weapons in equal measure. He stood by the window, dressed simply in dark linen, hair loose around his shoulders. He looked achingly human and infinitely sad. Sit, he said quietly, gesturing to the chairs. Mira sat, hands folded in her lap, and waited. Kale paced for a moment, clearly gathering his thoughts. Then he stopped before the fire, silhouetted against the flames. What do you know about Lycans? Only stories. That you can transform into wolves. That you're stronger, faster, more dangerous than humans. That some of you can be cursed. All true, but incomplete. He turned to face her. We're not just shapeshifters. We're creatures of magic and instinct, bound by laws older than kingdoms. One of those laws is the mate bond. What is it? A connection between souls. When a Lycan finds their mate, everything changes. Their wolf recognizes the person who completes them, the one who can calm their beast, share their strength, anchor their sanity. His eyes found hers. It's not a choice. It's fate. Mira's heart began to race. Why are you telling me this? Because from the moment you stood outside my door, my wolf has been screaming, mate. Because your scent drives me half mad with the need to claim you, protect you, keep you close. Because every instinct I possess says you're mine, and I'm terrified of what that means. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. I don't understand, Mira whispered. I'm nobody, just a servant with no family, no worth. Stop. He crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. You're not nothing. You're everything. My wolf knows it. I know it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it is you. But the curse makes this more complicated, yes. The witch who cursed me, a sorceress named Morgath, she was trying to break me. She knew the only thing that could save a cursed Lycan was a mate bond. So she wove magic into the curse to ensure I'd drive away anyone who might matter. His jaw clenched. Every full moon I become more beast than man. Every transformation pushes me closer to losing myself completely. If I fully transform, if I can't come back, the bond with you would snap. What would happen to you? I'd die, or become a mindless beast. Same thing, really. And what would happen to me? His expression went dark with pain. The severing of a mate bond destroys both parties. You'd survive, but you'd never be whole again. You'd feel the emptiness where I was supposed to be for the rest of your life. Mira absorbed this, heart aching. So if we acknowledge this bond, we're both risking everything. Yes, and if we don't, I continue my slow descent into madness. And you, he reached up, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. You walk away from the one person in this world who sees you, values you, needs you as much as you need air. That's not a fair choice. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. Mira leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. The witch who cursed you, why did she do it? Because I killed her brother. He was an alpha who'd been slaughtering humans, using them for blood rituals. I ended him in single combat, as the law demanded. Morgath cursed me in revenge, knowing death would have been kinder. Can the curse be broken? In theory. But it would require. He stopped, then continued reluctantly. It would require the willing sacrifice of my mate's blood, freely given during a full moon transformation. The blood of a true mate can break witch magic. But the risk? He shook his head. I'd be fully beast. If something went wrong, if the curse wasn't truly broken, I'd kill you before I could stop myself. But if it worked, then I'd be free. We'd both be free. But I won't ask that of you, Mira. I won't risk your life for my freedom. She opened her eyes, meeting his tortured gaze. What if it's not your choice to make? What if I want to try? No, Kale, I said no. He stood abruptly, turning away. I've accepted my fate. I'd rather die cursed than live, knowing I killed the only person who ever mattered. Mira stood as well, moving to stand behind him. Then let me stay with you anyway. Bond or no bond. Curse or no curse. Let me stay until the end. He turned, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. You'd do that? Watch me deteriorate? Be there when I finally lose myself completely? Yes. Why? Because being with you, even knowing how it ends, is better than being invisible forever. Kale pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. You're absolutely insane, perhaps. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart thunder. But I'm also yours. News of Kale's potential mate spread through Thornhaven like wildfire. Within days, the Council of Pack Alphas demanded an audience, a gathering of the 5 most powerful Lycans in the Northern Territories, convened to discuss matters of succession, law, and threat. Kale tried to shield Mira from it, but she insisted on attending. If this affects you, it affects me, she'd said. And he hadn't found the strength to argue. The council met in Thornhaven's Great Hall, a cavernous room with vaulted ceilings and walls adorned with weapons from 100 conquered enemies. 5 alphas sat at the long table, each radiating power and barely controlled aggression. Kale sat at the head, Mira standing at his side. Lord Varane spoke first, a silver-haired alpha with scars crossing his throat. You've brought a human girl before this council and claimed she's your mate. I don't claim it. I know it. A cursed king with a human mate. Another alpha, Lady Saren, tall and cold-eyed, laughed without humor. Convenient timing, Your Majesty. The full moon approaches, when you lose yourself completely, and suddenly you discover a potential cure. I discovered nothing. The bond was fate, not choice. Then prove it, Varane demanded. Let us test her. Blood scent never lies. Kale's hand shot out, gripping the table hard enough to crack wood. You will not touch her. We have the right, Saren countered. Pack law states any mate claim must be verified by the council. If she's truly bonded to you, the blood scent will confirm it. Mira stepped forward before Kale could respond. What do you need me to do? Mira, no, she met his eyes, steady and sure. If this is how we prove it, then let them test me. The testing was simple but invasive. They pricked her finger, collected a single drop of blood on white cloth, and brought it close to Kale while he stood 10 feet away. The reaction was immediate and violent. Kale's eyes flashed gold. His hands clenched into fists. Every muscle in his body went taut with restraint as a growl built in his chest, not threatening, but claiming. The sound resonated through the hall, making several alphas step back instinctively. Mine, he snarled, the word barely human. Get it away from her, now. They removed the cloth quickly, and Kale collapsed into his chair, breathing hard, fighting for control. Varane exchanged glances with the other alphas. The bond is real, but the curse remains, Saren said. What good is a mate bond if it kills you both? That's not your concern, Kale ground out. It is when you're the Lycan King. If you die without heir, without successor, the packs descend into chaos. We need to know your plan. My plan is to survive as long as I can and protect what's mine. Not good enough. Varane leaned forward. We propose an alternative. Reject the mate bond before it fully forms. Take a Lycan mate from one of our packs, someone strong enough to bear the transformation stress. Produce heirs. Secure the line. The words hit Mira like a physical blow. She stepped back, and Kale was on his feet instantly, moving between her and the council. I will not reject her, even if it means the packs fall into war. Even if it means your death and hers? Saren's voice was cold. Love is luxury, Your Majesty. Kings require sacrifice. Then find another king. Kale's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Because I'd rather die human with her than live cursed without her. The council erupted in argument, some demanding he see reason, others respecting his choice, all aware that forcing an alpha to reject his mate was impossible without bloodshed. Finally, Lord Varane raised a hand for silence. There is one other option. Old magic. Forbidden, but potentially effective. Kale went still. What option? A blood exchange during transformation. If the mate bond is strong enough, if the girl survives the process, it can transfer some of the curse's burden to her, weakening its hold on you. Absolutely not. It wouldn't break the curse completely, Varane continued, as if Kale hadn't spoken. But it would stabilize you. Give you years instead of months. Time to find a true cure. I said no. I won't ask her to carry even a fraction of this curse. What if she volunteers? Saren looked at Mira directly. Girl, do you understand what's being offered? Mira's voice came out steady despite her racing heart. You're asking me to share Kale's curse, to take some of the burden, so he doesn't lose himself. More than that, you'd be bonding yourself to him on a fundamental level. Part Lycan, part human, fully tied to his survival. If he dies, you die. If you die, he dies. No escape, no freedom, just eternal connection. And the risks? You could die during the blood exchange. You could lose your mind to the wolf. You could transform and never return to human form. Saren's eyes were merciless. Or it could work, and you'd both have a chance at survival. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Mira. She looked at Kale at the desperation and denial warring in his expression. at the way his hands trembled with the need to refuse this for her. And she understood that he would never ask, would never demand, would rather die than put her at risk. So she made the choice for both of them. I'll do it. Cale didn't speak to her for 2 days after the council meeting. He locked himself in his chambers, refused meals, sent away anyone who tried to reach him. Mira knew he was drowning in guilt and fear, fighting a war between what he wanted and what he thought she deserved. On the 3rd day, she simply walked into his rooms without permission. He stood at the window, looking more shadow than man. You shouldn't have agreed. I had to. You wanted to play martyr. To sacrifice yourself because you think you're worthless otherwise. He turned, and his eyes were molten with anger and anguish. Don't you understand? You're not nothing to me. You're everything. And I can't bear the thought of you suffering for my sake. Then suffer with me instead of alone. The words broke something in him. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I'm terrified, he whispered. Terrified it won't work. Terrified it will. Terrified of losing you either way. I'm scared too, she admitted. But I'm more scared of letting you face this curse alone when I could help. He pulled back, cupping her face. You understand what this means. If the blood exchange works, you'll be bound to me forever. Part of my pack, part of my soul. No going back, no second chances. I don't want a second chance. I want you. His kiss was desperate and gentle all at once, lips pressing against hers like a prayer, like an apology, like a promise. Mira kissed him back, pouring every unspoken feeling into the contact. And when they finally broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. If this works, he said roughly, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. And if it doesn't work, then I'll die knowing someone loved me enough to try. The ritual was set for the next full moon 3 days away. In those 3 days, Cale taught Mira everything he could about Lycan nature, about transformation, about the instincts that would flood her if the exchange succeeded. You'll feel the wolf, he explained, hand in hers as they walked the fortress gardens, not as a separate entity, but as part of yourself. Enhanced senses, stronger emotions, the urge to protect and claim. It can be overwhelming. Will it hurt? The transformation? Yes, every time. But you learn to embrace it rather than fight it. He squeezed her hand. I'll be there with you, always. They spent hours like that talking, touching, memorizing each other in case these were their last days. Cale told her about his childhood, about the burden of the crown, about the loneliness that had defined his life until she'd arrived. Mira shared her own story: orphanage, neglect, the desperate search for somewhere to belong. You belong with me, Cale said fiercely. Bond or no bond, curse or no curse, you belong. The night before the full moon, Cale held her while she slept, listening to her heartbeat and praying to gods he wasn't sure existed that he wouldn't lose her tomorrow. When dawn came, pale and cold, they prepared for the ritual. The council had arranged everything: a chamber deep in the dungeons, reinforced with iron and magic, guarded by the strongest alphas. Mira would be chained beside Cale during his transformation. At the peak of the full moon, she would cut her palm and offer her blood freely. If the bond was true, if the magic accepted the exchange, her blood would mix with his curse and redistribute the burden. If it failed, Cale would likely kill her before the others could intervene. You can still change your mind, Cale said as they descended the dungeon stairs. I won't think less of you. I'm not changing my mind. Mira, Cale. She stopped, turned, met his eyes. I love you. Cursed or not, king or not, beast or man. I love you, and I choose you, and nothing you say will change that. He stared at her, expression cracking. I love you too. More than life, more than freedom, more than anything this world has to offer. They kissed there in the shadowed stairwell, desperate and sweet and final. Then they continued down to face whatever fate awaited them. The chamber was exactly as she'd seen it before: circular, carved from stone, thick with the scent of old blood and older magic. Cale was chained first, heavy iron secured to walls and floor. Then Mira was secured beside him, close enough to touch, but not so close he could reach her if he lost control. The council alphas took their positions around the perimeter. Lord Varane handed Mira a silver knife, its blade inscribed with runes she couldn't read. When the transformation is complete, when the moon reaches its peak, cut your palm and offer the blood freely. Speak the words, blood to blood, soul to soul. I claim this burden as my own. If the bond is true, the magic will accept. Mira nodded. Fingers closing around the knife's hilt, the moon began to rise. Kale's transformation was agony to witness. She watched him break and reform, heard his screams dissolve into howls, saw the man she loved disappear beneath fur and fang and rage. The beast that remained fixed golden eyes on her with terrible, hungry focus. The moon reached its peak. Mira raised the knife, blood to blood, she whispered, drawing the blade across her palm. Pain flared bright and immediate. Soul to soul, she extended her bleeding hand toward Kale's beast. I claim this burden as my own. The beast lunged, chains snapping taut, jaws snapping inches from her fingers. Then it stopped, stared at the blood, and something impossible happened. The beast lowered its massive head and so gently pressed its nose against her bleeding palm. Light exploded through the chamber, blinding and absolute. Mira felt magic surge through her veins like lightning, like burning ice, rewriting her on a fundamental level. She heard screaming, hers or Kale's. She couldn't tell, and then darkness swallowed everything. Mira woke to silence and the scent of pine. Her body ached like she'd been torn apart and reassembled wrong. Every sense felt too sharp, the scrape of stone beneath her, the whisper of air currents, the thundering heartbeat that wasn't her own. She opened her eyes. Kale knelt beside her, human again, unchained, his hand pressed against her cheek. Relief and wonder warred in his expression. You're alive, he breathed. Did it work? Yes. He helped her sit up, supporting her trembling frame. Can you feel it? The wolf? Mira closed her eyes and reached inward. There a presence that was both foreign and familiar, wild and calm, strong and patient. Not a separate voice, but an extension of herself. Pack, mate, home. The words rose from instinct rather than thought. I feel it, she whispered, opening eyes that she somehow knew had shifted color, still human, but touched with amber now. I feel everything. Kale pulled her close, and the bond between them sang with recognition and completion. She could sense his emotions now: relief, love, lingering fear, overwhelming gratitude. The curse? She asked. Weakened. The council's mages examined us while you were unconscious. It's no longer killing me. The burden is shared now, distributed between us. I'll still transform, but I won't lose myself. We won't lose each other. So we have time. We have time. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Time to find a cure. Time to live. Time to be together. Lord Varane appeared in the doorway, his weathered face showing rare approval. The bond has stabilized. The council acknowledges the mate claim as valid and binding. Your position as Lycan King is secure, and your mate is now recognized as the future queen. Mira blinked. Queen? You're bonded to the king. You share his curse, his power, his authority. Varen's expression softened slightly. You're also the first human to successfully undergo blood exchange in 300 years. That makes you either very lucky or very powerful. Both, Kale said quietly, helping Mira to her feet. She's both. The days that followed were a blur of adjustment. Mira learned to navigate her enhanced senses, to recognize the wolf's instincts without being controlled by them. Kale remained at her side constantly, teaching, supporting, making sure she never felt alone in the transformation. The first time she fully shifted under the full moon was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She became a wolf smaller than Kale's massive beast form, but swift and silver-furred and achingly alive. They ran together through the forest, two souls in wolf skin, the bond between them blazing like starlight. When dawn came and they changed back to human form, tangled together in a clearing, Mira finally understood what Kale had meant about belonging. This is what you've been missing, she said, fingers tracing patterns on his bare chest. Someone to run with, not just someone. You. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. Always you. Weeks passed. The curse continued to weaken as they shared its burden, the blood exchange creating a kind of balance that even the council's mages hadn't anticipated. Hope, which had been a foreign concept in Thornhaven, began to take root. One evening, as snow began to fall and winter settled over the northern territories, Kale brought Mira to the eastern solarium, the place where they'd first really spoken. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, silver carved with wolves and moons, set with a stone that seemed to hold its own inner light. It's traditional, he explained, suddenly uncertain in a way she'd never seen him. When a Lycan claims a mate, when the bond is acknowledged, there's a ceremony, vows before the pack, recognition of the union. He met her eyes. I know you didn't choose any of this. The curse, the bond, the danger. But I'm choosing you now, freely and completely. Will you have me? Not as an obligation or a burden, but as a partner and a mate. Mira took the ring, feeling its weight and significance. You're asking me to marry you. I'm asking you to be my queen, my mate, my partner in all things. He smiled, small and vulnerable. I'm asking you to choose me the way I choose you. She thought of the girl who'd stood at Thornhaven's gates with nothing and no one, desperate for a place to belong. She thought of the invisible orphan who'd never mattered to anyone, and she looked at the man before her, powerful, cursed, broken, healing, who saw her as everything. Yes, she said simply. The ceremony was held 3 days later, under a sky filled with stars and falling snow. The council alphas attended, along with every Lycan in Thornhaven, bearing witness as Kale and Mira exchanged vows older than kingdoms. Blood to blood, Kale said. Hands joined with hers, soul to soul, Mira replied. Pack to pack, heart to heart, until the last star falls and the world ends. You are mine, and I am yours. They sealed the vows with a kiss, and the assembled pack hauled their approval, a sound that echoed through the forest and up to the winter sky. That night, in their shared chambers, Kale held Mira close and whispered against her hair. Thank you. For what? For seeing past the monster. For staying when you should have run. For loving me when I couldn't love myself. Thank you for asking me to stay. She kissed his jaw, his cheek, his lips. For giving me a place to belong. You've always belonged. Mira, I just had the honor of being the one to recognize it. They fell asleep like that. Two souls bound by blood and choice, and something stronger than any curse. And when the full moon rose, they transformed together and ran as one through silver-lit snow, the bond between them blazing brighter than any witch's magic. The curse would take years to break completely, but they had time now. They had each other, and that was enough.